Hi, this is Kenzie Vixen, Boston Single Girl, and I'm here with Magnus Sullivan of manshop.com and betterthanthedms.com.
How you doing? Thank you for having me on the show.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about manshop.com. I see that your website says sex shop run by men for men.
Well, there's kind of like this elephant in the room that I discovered, and it's not that men don't use sex toys. Really, it's that straight men don't use a very wide variety of toys and don't talk about them and don't really know about them and don't understand how they can affect the full spectrum of your sexuality and development as a person, right? It's just like stick my dick in this tube and jack off. It's kind of like the male, the Fleshlight is basically the man's sex toy. And I realized like there was a much broader spectrum of sensual sexual experience that men should be having and weren't really having. And a big part of it was tied to the lack of availability of stores focused really kind of primarily towards straight men, but also the dialogue around that was missing. And that's why I kind of developed the store as the e-commerce center and then the blog, which really deals with the intersection of society and sexuality.
Which is fantastic because I kind of do the same thing, but only for the female side. So yeah, and when I think of male sex toys, what I think of is trafficking.
Yeah,
and it's really,
exactly.
And there is so much else out there. So what other types of products can men find on your site?
Well, everything. I mean, really, and I think part of the difficulty is that straight men in particular view the use of toys as feminizing in a lot of different ways. And particularly in certain areas, like when you get into ass play or something like that, it's kind of like gay. Right? And so what I'm trying to do is kind of recast the way these toys can be used. So, for ass play, it's kind of like if you want to really understand how to have good anal sex, then you need to know what it's like to have something in your ass. Because when you do, you'll understand what to do and what not to do, and how to build and prepare somebody for a positive experience, right? So I'm trying to recast kind of some of these things that have traditionally come out of the LGBTQ community or the gay male community. And so straight men are looking at it going, well, that's not me, right? That doesn't apply to me. And in fact, actually it really applies to us, but just in a different way. So I've tried to kind of incorporate vibration. So my initial article when I started the site was like, where is the Hitachi Wand for men? And I was like kind of like, women have all these great toys, and this friend of mine wrote back and said, there is a toy like that, and guess what? It's called the Hitachi Wand. And I was like, what? And he wrote an article for my blog on masturbating with the Hitachi Wand. I said, that's crazy. So it's not possible. And so I got my wife's Hitachi Wand, and it was a completely radical change in transformative sexual experience, because it was a way of masturbating that was unlike anything I had done before. And I think the closest thing that a man can actually come to understand how a woman might have is with this very slow build. And there's this kind of passive thing where something's happening to me. I'm not really in control of it. It's starting to happen to me. And the orgasm is a much different sense than this highly localized, very intense, short thing. It's a much broader, slower build. I'm like, wow, that was incredible. What else is out there? Right? And that's when I started to kind of explore not just different toys, but how to use toys in combination with one another to achieve a whole variety of different experiences. And so an example was I was just playing around with these toys. Literally, I was like, it was like being in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. I was just pulling things out, and just by accident, I started having multiple orgasms and maintaining an erection, after orgasm and then coming again. And I realized, wow, this has a lot to do with mindset and a variation in stimulation, and also a paradigm shift of it's possible, right? Because before you're kind of like, I gotta go away for the weekend.
Give me a few hours.
Some time here, fluid IV or something. And so kind of just busting out of that paradigm is also part of the process of saying there's a lot to learn here. And then all of a sudden it was kind of like, well, when I'm having these experiences and doing things that are seen as feminizing or very vulnerable and kind of contrary to a very traditional sense of masculinity, you realize like, hey, there's a link between opening your mind up to a broad variety of sexual experience and empathy. and understanding. Because if you don't have a kind of focal point for connection with the other, you can't really feel and understand it. And that was kind of a big aha moment where I realized like how deep this issue was for straight men in particular, because they don't talk about it. They have a very narrow spectrum of sexual experience available to them. It affects their relationships with their own bodies. It affects their relationships with their female partners or their partners in general. And it affects their relationships, as we've seen with Trump and we've seen with Brock Turner, you know, with the world around them. And so I kind of realized like this is deeper than just a site for toy review. It's about what's going on with straight men and the violence around male sexuality and the toxicity around male sexuality. And I think a lot of that is just tied to how narrow the experience is, how frightened straight men are of a broader sexual spectrum, and how rigid the definition of masculinity is that freaks people out and causes a lot of stress whenever they are veering outside of that experience. Right? So I kind of felt like it was really important to have sort of an intellectual framework with the blog to complement the e-commerce environment. Just having an e-commerce environment is like, so what? Everybody can have a toy store. But it's like, what is missing from the straight male experience here that makes these toys so important?
So the blog kind of developed out of the e-commerce site.
Yeah, they were kind of the same. I mean, it was like a Forrest Gump moment where, you know, I kind of was starting out with just like writing, you know, reviews of toys and then kind of realizing this is a much deeper issue. And the reviews turned into, you know, issues around like, hey, how come guys aren't talking about this? Why do women, you know, feel more comfortable than men? Why are gay men so far ahead? Because they've had to deal with sexual identity, because it's not normalized. They've got to, how do I fit into this world? And they've got to deal with desire and reciprocity of desire. Straight men don't deal with that usually. They're just like, I desire you. And unless you say absolutely no, right, I'm gonna have you, right? Like, if I desire you, that somehow justifies having you. And gay men don't grow up in a world like that. They grow up in a world where they have to be very sensitive to the response that somebody has for their desire and attraction. Straight men don't have that kind of culture of emotional intelligence or vocabulary even to begin, let alone the sort of framework of identity that my sexual identity can be very broad and I can still be considered whatever, straight, you know, if that category even has like a real rigid line. But I think it is important for straight men to realize like there's a major identity crisis that men have. The world is changing. They're very frightened. They don't know where they fit into this world, and we've got to start doing the same work that a lot of other subcultures have been doing for decades to figure out their role in the world. And so it's kind of like this big irony that the group that's been kind of empowered is now completely at a loss. And I think the election and the culture around the election is showing just how deep that fear of the other, of change, of being part of the world rather than controlling the world is.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how sex positive. I've actually read several of the articles on your site, and I love how sex positive they are. Because you're right, that is missing especially for straight men. There's plenty of information articles out there for women about, you know, being in control of your body and being comfortable in your own skin, but that's missing for men. So what would you say have been, you know, do you get a lot of feedback from men on your articles and, you know, things that you say, and if so, what type of feedback do you get?
Strangely, the feedback I get, first of all, is private. They don't want to post it publicly, so I get private emails. And most of the feedback is coming from women who want their partners to read this stuff, right? Yeah, it's kind of like, wow, I've got to give this to my husband or boyfriend or whatever. And again, I think that speaks to, you know, I've had a number of opportunities to talk, you know, in public forums about this, and if there are women in the room, they dominate the conversation. The guys just like, they can't even, they're so, you know, whereas the women say, oh my God, this is great, the other day I was on the bus, and the vibrations, and, you know, they'll just start talking, the other one will say, oh yeah, and the guys are just sitting there, they don't know how to start talking about this stuff without their entire identity, you know, being kind of questioned. So the irony is, women are actually responding more to the book and the blog than men are.
Well, I think it's because, especially with, you know, being a woman, we'll have sex toy parties. Well, you know, we're always, I think the whole Trump thing with grab women by the pussy. That sparked me. I did a whole show about that. But I think women tend to be a little more open about talking about sex, whether it's with our partner or not. We tend to be a lot more open than men when it comes to talking about sex, or what we like, what we don't like, and toys, or what we're doing in the bedroom or out of the bedroom. I don't think men are really at that point yet. I find that to be.
Oh, totally. I think that's part like Betty Dodson. I mean, you've had there's so many different people out there. Carol Queen's a great friend and inspiration for me personally. It's like you have all these Joni Blank, and then you go down the road. So Nina, right? Exactly. Great. So many examples of women who show diverse sexuality as an empowering part of their being, and you don't have that on the straight side. It's hard to find like a holistic male that is sexually empowered, open about it. It tends to be seen as that's vulnerable. That's a vulnerable thing to do, and vulnerability is not masculine. Exactly. Yeah. And so you're kind of caught in this trap. It's like, I really need to talk about this stuff. I can't. And then one of the things that really was interesting to me, because I am in a sex positive community, I'm surrounded by women who completely support my masturbation, my porn consumption, my sex life, and but a lot of men are with women who don't, and they are threatened by their masturbation habits, their porn consumption, their sexuality in general is a threat. So that was another piece that was like, whoa, I never thought of that. But there's a big piece and that's part of the education aspect of it. Say, hey, women, there's a role here too that you may not understand it, but when your partner's masturbating, it's not a violation of your relationship on any level at all. If you make him feel that way, he's already having a hard time, talking about anything. Now he's not going to talk about it at all, and that kind of perpetuates the cycle because it's like, what's going on there? Hey, so you're keeping something from me. So your sexuality, there must be something wrong because you're keeping it a secret, right?
Well, and a lot of women see it as a rejection. Well, if you go off and masturbate, what's wrong with me?
Right.
We take everything. We internalize everything. So
Right.
we take everything personally.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of women do see that, and there needs to be that conversation as well. So not only do men need to be more comfortable in their skin, but then that conversation between men and women, or whoever your partner is, you need to have that conversation as well.
Yeah, so I did write an article on that, and it's like, one issue is the monogamy issue, and the purity, the singularity of attraction, right? If you're attracted to anyone or anything other than me, you're somehow violating our bond of intimacy. Another thing that I think is interesting is the to be desired. And I get this a lot in the sex positive communities I'm in, where people are like, but I want you to feel special, that's all, I want to feel special, right? And then what they're really saying is, I want to be the object of your desire, and I want to feel that. I want to feel that. Maybe they won't even say I want to be the only object, but I want to feel that. And I think for many women, more than I initially understood, like being desired is the primary trick. It's more attractive than intelligence or looks even. It's like attention. And I didn't understand how powerful that could be until I started talking to someone about this and some men. And so violating that, again, is seen as a violation of the fundamental bond that is at the source of our intimacy. And then there's body culture, right? Which is, if I'm masturbating to something that isn't like you, then I must not want you, right? Where it's like, no, that's not it at all, right? But that's something that a lot of women struggle with on levels that men have no understanding of. None at all, because we're not subject to the same kind of body culture media issues that women are. But the 18-year-old hard body meme in porn, but it really is just anything other than what I am, must be a rejection of who I am, right? And so I try to kind of open that dialogue up a little bit to say that has nothing to do with anything that's going on there. In a way, it has everything to do with it because it is real. It's a real emotional thing. But that's not the intention or mindset that's going on. And so you need to have a conversation around it, because if that is there and present, everybody's repressed and everybody loses. If you open it up, you put it on the table and start to talk about it, everybody wins.
So what would be the one thing that you would want listeners and viewers to take away from all the education that you're putting out there for men and, in a sense, for women?
I think that sexuality and understanding your body is directly tied to improved sex in general, improved health, and improved relationships with the world. All right, and I fundamentally believe that, and I think that the role of self-pleasure is underestimated as far as acting as a springboard to personal growth, and having the vocabulary to talk about these issues is actually the foundation to any healthy relationship, because at the core of any relationship is the ability to navigate complex topics, and sex is a complex topic in America particularly. But it's also the foundation of any healthy relationship, right? Which is to talk about difficult stuff and things that are hard to get out. And so I think engaging in this process is critical for not just pleasure, physical pleasure, but growth.
Well, thank you very much for meeting with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
And definitely, if you want to learn more, you can check out manshop.com, and the blog is betterthanthehand.com.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you.